He mentioned to you earlier, he was packing 4 chairs, all the water for all of us, on his backpack. And I believe at this point in time on the hike, he was up getting the chairs set up so that in the event that we actually made it to the top, we'd be able to sit down and have a drink. Well, Ellen and I had a plan because we were concerned about Elsie and Carol. I mean, they were getting up there in age, 77 and 80 some on. And so the plan was that we'll have Carol go first, and then I'll go second, and then Beatty will go third. Not Beatty, Elwyn would go third, and then Elsie would go third, and Elwyn would go 4. That was the sequence that we had. So we're crawling up this mountain, and we got to a place where, I don't know what happened, we had talked to the ladies about being careful because there's slippery rock and loose rock and stuff. So just be really careful with your footing. Well, wouldn't you know it, Carol lost her footing. And she fell backwards, like this. Well, I was so close to her that, it was almost fate the way that it worked out. But she just fell right back into my arms, like this. And we're sitting on the hill, and she was kind of laughing. And I said to her, Carol, do you fall for all the men that you take up this mountain? And she was laughing and laughing, and she said, no, just you. And I pushed her back up, and we continued back up the trip. That was a cute incident. There's many more stories on that trip. Someday we'd sure like to relate them. In defense of the gluten lady, we know that she was the gluten queen. But when I arrived here a few years ago, not when I arrived, but when a few years back here, I developed a gluten intolerance. And she found out about that. And so she said, I have something special for you for the potluck. She says, it's a gluten-free. I found a recipe and I made it up. And she says, it's on the table. Now, I want you to know that this is the dish, this one here. And I'm going to put it on the table in this location. So I want you to make sure and you get that because you're the one that's got the gluten intolerance. In fact, she says, I'm going to put a big sign on it that says gluten-free. And I think that that'll keep most of the people away. So we had this meal, and yes, she was making this gluten menu regularly, or gluten-free menu regularly. And then exactly happened as she thought. Not too many people were eating gluten-free stuff. They thought, that can't be that great. But at first, at least, but then it seemed like it got caught on, and a lot of people started in on it. But at first, I can remember that she would bundle up the leftover gluten-free product into a container that she had brought and gave it to me and said, you take this home and you can have it. And we had food to eat for quite a little while into that next week. So she not only was the gluten queen, but she was a gluten-free queen as well. So bless her heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonnie, I believe you had indicated you'd like to say something. Are you going to just stay there? Okay.
Well, everything that I wrote down has almost all covered, but I just want to mention that way back in the beginning of my friendship with Carol, she and Mona, amazing to me, she and Mona put on a wedding for Jim and me. One did the reception, one did the wedding. Maybe they collaborated on everything, I don't know. But they did everything. They did everything. And they loved us. And we were just poor young kids, sort of, at that point. And they went the extra mile for us because they loved us. And that's something that probably the rest of you can't share. Another thing was, several years ago, we decided to have a Thanksgiving potluck every year, mainly for our winter family who were here and didn't have family here to be with. And so I asked, with fear and trepidation, I asked Carol if she would be interested in helping me with this idea. And she whined and, but she said she would. And she just outdid herself. And we had a deal. And the deal was she would take care of the food and I would take care of the people, and never the twain shall meet. And she did not want to see me in the kitchen, and she did not want to be seen talking to people. And I don't know how many years, we've probably 13, 14 years we did that Thanksgiving potluck, and she brought half the food in addition to taking care of the kitchen and everything. She was just a miracle. Another thing that came along a few years later was the prison ministries, prison volunteers appreciation potlucks, where all of our prison volunteers, we had the prison hosted a dinner for them, an appreciation dinner. And we had it here at the family center. And so I was pretty brave by then, so I just asked her straight up, would you help me with this? It's a potluck. All you have to do is take care of the food, and I'll take care of the people. And so she and I did that for several years. And it was good. We had a good time. And the other thing that I recall was every year, thank you, Bobby Joe, every year we all went Christmas caroling. We had our little lists of who the shut-ins were and who would appreciate Christmas carols, and we always went Christmas caroling, and Carol was always with us.
Yeah.
Always with us. She was faithful in everything she did, and I loved her.
Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie. Bobby Joe?
First, I'd like to say in 1976, Josie's mom and I were baptized together. She was my twin. We were baptized in the same tank the same day, but Daniel was 4 years old, and we used to go in gathering like crazy in those days. We would go out for 3 weeks, and we'd go with singing groups. We'd go for hours, it seemed like, and we would do it. And our kids would go with us. You remember, because you did it before. And so Daniel texted me when I said, do you have a memory about Aunt Carol? And he said, yes, I remember all that time we were in gathering. I just couldn't wait to get back for Aunt Carol's hot chocolate. That's all he could think about. And anyway, Carol was my friend. And she was also my cook when I was a Pathfinder director. And one year, God surprised me, and we had 36 Pathfinders. And we probably had 10 staff at least. So that makes 46 people. Well, the most important thing, the hardest part when you're a Pathfinder leader, if you're going on a camp out, is transportation and cooking. And Carol was my cook, and Rena, her sister, helped her. And I never had to worry about anything. She brought the camp stove, she brought the dishes, she brought the plates, she brought all the food. I said, Carol, we're supposed to ask the kids to bring something. No, I'll get there and it won't be there, and so she brought all the food herself. She paid for all the food. But the only hard part of having Carol for your cook is I would write out a schedule, breakfast at 8:15, and if I got there at 8:20, I was in so much trouble. You said 8:15, and this food is getting cold, and I would get it every time if I got held up, and woe to the kids if they didn't eat the crusts of their sandwiches. That was a sin. If they threw away their crusts, and even worse, if they took a plate of food and then dumped it. Rena had gone through the depression, and she just could not abide that, but we had so many wonderful times in camp in Pathfinders. I wanted to say one thing about when Mona mentioned that Barney was going to marry Dottie, and he had lived as a bachelor with his 2 teenage sons, or 3 teenage sons for a while, and Carol went in and she said, "You cannot bring her back to this house." And so they got a crew of ladies from the church, and we were cleaning out Barney's house. And I'll never forget this. Barney had like a little shed, and he had pieces of wood and this and that. He was a sign painter, and Carol would say, "Barney, what about this?" "Well, I kind of thought that someday I might use that to do." "Oh, Barney, you know you're never going to use that." "Okay, just throw it away." Then she'd go, "What about this?" "Well, I kind of thought I could use that for a sign." "Barney, you know you're never going to use it." "Okay." And after a while, Barney said, "I think I'll just take it all. If you find any tools, save them for me." And he said, "I was going to take a sign to the dump and put it up that said, 'Home Sweet Home.'" And but the last, probably for 10 or 12 years, we had Friday night prayer group. At my house, we would eat lentils, and we would sing songs from gospel melodies, and we would pray mainly for our children and grandchildren. And whenever we had prayer requests, that was your mom's request. And I know there were times when maybe some of your kids needed it more, or Stacy's. We prayed. And I remember it was Ethel, Elsie, Carol, and Fred and I. Fred was there with all the ladies. And Ethel had it every week. We would share our memory verses and our blessings. And Ethel always had the one, and I think it's in 2 Peter, where it says, "God is not slack concerning his promises, but is," I can't say it now, but he's not willing that any should be lost, but that all should come to repentance. And that was our prayer for all of our children. And so I loved her. She loved me even though she yelled at Pastor. I told you that. She would yell at me, but she loved me.
All right. Now, there may be others who would like, yes. We'll open it now to anyone who would like to share. And Norma, Sonentag.
I have a lot of memories, and so many that have come to mind from this, listening. But I have 2 short ones relating to money, kind of, and then one that I'm going to tell for my husband. And money, one of them was camp meeting. My sister and I were not too well fixed financially, and Carol wasn't poor. Up there, we were up there one year with her, and she was saying something about, "Well, I can't get out of this bookstore without spending at least $100 every year." And that was a lot of money back in 67, 68, somewhere there. And my sister and I were both kind of in shock, because $100 at the bookstore, like going to heaven. And then when we were helping clean up that dump, but it was, and we were helping clean it. And I had this white plastic trash can. It was filthy, but we had chemicals, that you spray on, and I had brush, and we had like cloths, and I was cleaning that trash can. And Carol comes sweeping through the room like she did, checking everything and managing everything and helping with everything, and she says, toss it, toss it. But I just kind of snuck off in the corner, and I kept cleaning, because you don't throw it. I got it nice and clean. And then when for my husband, they were at, I don't know if you knew the Ibarras, were the Ibarras here? Joe and Sins, yeah. Joe and, help me out. Daisy, yes. Anyway, they were hanging out, and their boy, her boy was Gary Ibarra. They were hanging out, and Sean and just a bunch of the youth, and Rhonda was there. And then when it was time to go home, she wanted a ride on his motorcycle. So she pops on his bike, and they fly up to Carol's, and he drops off Rhonda. Well, he heard about that the next time that he was at church. She said, "Don't you ever, ever give my daughter a ride on your motorcycle again." And that's because she lost her Gary, her second born, 10 minutes after her firstborn. She lost him in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
I'm Gwen. It was my mother, Eva Jo Harris Crewell, that introduced Carol to Robert. And I thought I was going to be the one to be able to share that, but Mona beat me to this. And man, I thought I had the clincher. I have so many memories of your family, and you know that. I didn't think I was going to do this. It goes back to as early going to your when the home was out the 24th Street, that house. And going in and being so amazed that your mom and dad had a skunk as a pet. And I, as a young girl, thought that was the coolest thing ever. And then in 1965, your folks stood up, for my mom and stepdad. They were witnesses at the wedding that took place at your house over there off the 24th Street. And that's just the beginning of memories with them. So many. I remember one time I said to Carol, though, when I was a young girl, and it was a mistake, and I said, "You remind me so much of Carol Burnett." That was not the thing to say to Carol at that time. Oh, no, it wasn't. But through the years, there was many trips that I would go to camp meeting with her and the kids, help her out while she was teaching the classes, get meals for the kids, just help her all the way around. There was one year at camp meeting, between my freshman and sophomore year, my dad brought up the camper shell, parked it behind Carol's trailer, and 4 of us girls, Eunice, Lynn Bouchard, Maurice, and we stayed in that camper shell through camp meeting, and Carol was responsible for us. I look back at that and I think, why in heaven's name did she take on that responsibility? But we felt so grown up, but she did keep a close eye on us through the years. And many of you have talked about her cooking. I would be interested to know how far back her cooking goes for Pathfinder clubs. I mean, I was a leader back in the 80s, and she was doing it then, and I'm sure she was doing it maybe back in the 70s. And there's just so many kids that have been blessed by her cooking through the years at camp meeting. She just was truly a hand of God. She was his hand here on earth and helped so many people and shared so much. Her pocketbook was endless. Sometimes it seemed like, I don't know. And she just kept giving and giving of food and her time and her service. And I had to chuckle when you told the story about Dan Williams clicking his pins. I can remember she did not like repetitive sounds, and she would let you know. There was no doubt. But Carol will be greatly missed, and we're so thankful. I know each and one of us are so thankful that we got to spend some time with her and learn some of her wisdom she had to share with us. We love you guys.
Thank you. Yes, Diane? Oh.
I just wanted to touch on a few things that haven't been mentioned yet. Norman and I were blessed to know Carol for 16 years. We were in the same Sabbath school class, Merle and Dolores' class in the chapel when we first came here, and Robert and Carol were in that Sabbath school class. She and Elsie Knight led out with the picnic in the park, and so many people were blessed by that. Her generosity was shown when we had a talent show here, and she shared her fur coat with my sister for a funny skit. One Sabbath, she fell. She used to go up these steps and back to the library in recent years for her Sabbath school class, and she fell on the steps and was more worried that her wig had gone askew than about the blood that was flowing. And the last thing is on the Christmas decorations. This last Christmas, she had me take pictures and show her what the sanctuary looked like with all the different decorations. I look forward to meeting her in the resurrection.
Okay, go ahead.
Me. It's like
Okay.
we've got a microphone war going on here. Oh, goodness. I mentioned to my family via Facebook chat that that Auntie Carol had passed, and one of the first thing my mom said was telling the other kids, Junior and Julie, who were probably too young to remember her, said, "Oh yeah, that's the lady who made the gluten steaks. And then I learned how to make those from her. She taught me that." It seems she was very infamous for her cooking. And, you know, I'm learning a ton about her that I never knew. She was in my life since I moved here, just about 4 years old. And one of my first memories of her is her teaching me the bird honor, even though I was too young to be in Pathfinders. And she was lobbying hard to get me into Pathfinders, even though I was too young. And she said, "See, she knows all the things. I taught her so well." And, you know, she was just strong. She was a strong woman. You know, she just was. I'm learning all these things about her past, but to me, she just always was. She was just Auntie Carol. And, you know, anytime, how long I had been to church or hadn't been to church, you know, moved away, I moved back. Anytime I came, it was just always a hug and "Oh, Cassie, how are you doing? I've missed you so much." And she and Mrs. Knight sent me birthday cards, which I still have so many of them. I've treasured them all these years. You know, I'm going to miss her so much. Like so many of the Pathfinder kids, you know, she fed me. She yelled at me. And, you know, she taught me honors. I learned how to cook from her. And she taught me really what it means to just live to give, you know, how to just give to others without even really thinking. That's who she was. And, you know, I know that each one of us in this room has been touched by her in some way, and I'm really happy to see that there's so many people that will remember her with love now that she's not here anymore.
Thank you. Now we have a couple more hands here. Okay. Okay, Mary?
Well, I've only known her about 3 years because that's when I came to the church, and she welcomed me. I felt very, welcomed, and used to have potluck at at the park, and that's where I became more acquainted with her. And when I had the baptism, she offered to, show me the ropes, as far as the robe, and afterwards. And also, I'm so glad that I saw her the Saturday before she passed away. I think I brought a smile to her face, I believe. I know I did. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you so much. And Steve and Liddy, and okay, we've got several. Oh,
I just want to say that I don't think Carol was ever a greeter in this church, but I think she should have been. She was one of the very first persons I met. She was very warm. She was very welcoming to me, and I was new in the faith at the time. I remember I was Sabbath school superintendent. I thought maybe just a little bit too soon, but she was always giving me encouraging words, giving me a lot of self-confidence in what I did, and I really appreciated that from her because I needed that feedback at the time. I will also say that I was blessed to go to Chiapas, Mexico, on a mission trip with her, and I remember between her and Beatty, they did the cooking for us,
Yes.
and as far as I remember, nobody got sick,
No.
and we were always full. But the one other thing I remember from her is actually how physically strong she was at the time, anyways. I remember she had this special scale, and we had a 20-kilogram limit on Aeromexico for our bags, and she picked up my bag and weighed it, and I'm like, how can you do that? But she did it, and I remember my bag was 21 kilograms, so I had to lose a pair of shoes to bring it back. So she was very physically strong. And you touched on a memory also. I remember it wasn't so long ago that her and Halsey Knight did that hike up Telegraph Peak.
Thank you.
And that's kind of motivating for me because it's been 3 years now this month that I haven't been able to go up there, and I'm sure everybody knows that my health is not the best, but I'm just praying that one day I'll get a new kidney and I'll be able to lose this right here. And that's my inspiration, because if Carol can do it and Elsie can do it, I can do it. Thank you.
That's good. Okay, Liddy?
We first started coming to this church in 2011, my husband and I, and after a couple weeks of being treated like guests, we decided we'd take stuff to potluck, and we would go out and help put things on the table. And so we walked in the kitchen, and Carol was there, and it was like, this goes out there, put it at one end of the table or the other. Salads first. But anyway, after the experience of that day, we got in the car to go home. I thought maybe at some point in her life she'd been an Army sergeant in charge of the mess hall, But anyway, I tried not to let my first impression keep me from going, and I'm glad.
Yeah.
Because Carol was a very warm person, a very good person. And I remember she loved Annie, my little dog. She used to have a little dog like Annie that was very docile and everything. And I'd take her when she was in rehab. And, oh, you brought Annie. Just leave her with me, will you? I want her. Yep, you know Carol. She's mine. She was a very lovely person, and I'm glad to have known her.
That does remind me of when she would come to have the children's story. And for the children's story, she pulls out her kind of a purse and brings her little dog out for the story. And I thought, wow, a dog like that could sit all through church and not make a sound? And then she'd put it back in this little case. Who has the mic now? Oh, Steve, you good.
Okay, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but I got to do it. Carol Bromell was the worst person ever and is going to burn in hell. Okay, so you guys all know her. You've heard the stories. You know that ain't true. But the reason I tell that story is because we were at a funeral here for Fred Diaz, And the people got up and were talking about Fred Diaz, who was a very close friend. And during that service, Carol was sitting next to me, and she goes, "You ever notice that at my age, I've gone to a lot of funerals, and if you've ever noticed that every time you're at a funeral, the person was the best person ever, they never did anything wrong, everybody loves them, they're gonna go to heaven. For just once, I'd like to hear somebody say, that guy was the worst, and he's not gonna get into heaven." So Carol, that one was for you. Okay, a couple of stories. The first time I ever met Carol, we were going to potlucks. We started coming to church here, and we started going to potlucks, and it was pretty intimidating to say. Everybody would be like, "Well, you got to go talk to Carol," and I'd say, "What about this?" "Oh, you have to talk to Carol." And there was a lot of people here at the church at the time, and I'm like, "Who's this woman Carol, and how come she has so much authority?" And I mean, you would like to go do something, and it's like, "Well, did you ask Carol?" And it was like, "No, I guess I better go ask Carol." And so one day, I think I dropped my fork or something, and I went to go get a new fork. And yeah, you guys know, huh?
No.
Yeah, and I just went into the kitchen and grabbed a fork, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm getting a fork because I dropped my fork." "You're supposed to keep your fork." And I said, "Oh, I didn't throw my fork away by accident. It fell on the floor." And man, I realized Carol's got some power around here. Like this woman rules with the iron fist. And but needless to say, I didn't really have a great opinion of her when I first started because of that interaction. But I'll say all that changed when I started doing Bible studies with Jim and Bonnie. With my wife. We would go every week. And then Carol and Elsie were there with Barney, Beatty, and Reagan. And it's funny, the power of God, because when you sit down and you fellowship with people like that, you read the Word, you read the blessing from heaven, and you share that with other people, your relationship changes. You become closer, not only to God, but to each other. And that's what we're all supposed to be doing anyway. I think God knows that that's how it works because he tells us to do it. And I'll tell you what my opinion of Carol after that went from like resentment and aggravation to love. So I love Carol. I love her with all my heart. She did a lot, I'll tell you that. She did do a lot. I've heard a lot of stories. People said, Carol did this and Carol did that. But one thing I've always noticed about her is she had a group of people that were always supporting her as well. And I was one of those people. If she asked me to do anything, I would be right there for her. And I don't think she could have got as much done because that woman did a lot. She couldn't have got as much done if she didn't have the love and help from other people. And she cared about everybody's salvation. She would come here and pray when you didn't even know she was praying for you. And I found that out later. You know, the ladies at church are praying for you. Oh, yeah? Really? I didn't know that. And then, of course, the birthday card of support. You know, I mean, who remembers your birthday all the time? Carol and Elsie would always send that card. And that was a blessing. I mean, when I got that card, I felt special. And then when we would go to camp meeting, first couple of times we went, we always heard about Carol's lunch. And we didn't know where it was or what it was or what it was all about. But I remember one day, I think we got in the group, like we got the invitation. And we're like, whoa, we get the invitation? And then we had to look for it. Well, it's just up the hill. Well, that's a big hill. We walk up the hill. Well, you're not there yet, like Pastor said. And we got there, and you know what? It really was a good lunch. I mean, that woman had all kinds of food and dessert on top of that, and then the fellowship with Yuma Central. I really always felt like Yuma had like a better thing going, because a lot of the other churches didn't do that. They didn't get together like that, fellowship like that. And like I said, she cared so much about your salvation that, like Pastor said, she even brought her dog to church. You know, she's sneaking in her purse. And then also, like Diane said, I remember one day when I actually realized she wore a wig. Like I was like, Carol, I knocked on her door. I had to drop something off. Oh no, I think I had to pick up something for the desert breakfast. And I knocked on the door, and it was like took like 20 minutes. And I'm like, Carol, I'm in a hurry. I told you that. Why did it take you so long? Because you're not going to see me without my wig. And I was like, you wear a wig? And she was like, and don't tell anybody. But, you know, all in all, I say, like I said, my heart changed towards her. I love that woman. And I'll like everybody said, I can't wait to see her in heaven.
Amen. Was there, yes, Kevin. Yeah.
Wow, what a lady. I first ran into Carol when I started opening up the church in the morning, and her and Elsie would be sitting over in the primary room going through the prayers, praying for each and every one of us and our kids and all the other people that were on her list. And of course, they did have the birthday card list out, and they were making birthday cards and signing birthday cards and getting everything ready. And I'd go, up and down the hall doing what I needed to do. And it didn't take long before it became apparent that Carol was also in charge of the sound in the church. Fred was doing the sound up there, and he needed some help, and he started going on vacation, and I pretty much started taking over the sound. And I would come by, and Carol would say, "Now, I'm not sure who's speaking today, but if it's who I think it is, you need to turn it up a little." And I said, "Well, Carol, it's already starting to whine now. It's pretty, I need to hear it." I said, okay. So I tried to go and keep Miss Carol as happy as I could because, it's Miss Carol, right? And then when I found out that being a deacon also involved helping her in and out of the family center with food, you learn your duties as you go with Miss Carol, right? And you find out that, that she has her way of doing things, and things need to be brought in a certain way and put in a certain place. And if they don't get put in a certain place, you get this special little sound. Ooh! Anybody recognize that? Right? Yeah. I became quite familiar with that sound. She was something. Miss Carol taught me a lot about communication. She taught me that I need to be able to communicate what I need and have a conversation about it, and if it doesn't go exactly the way I want it to go, then I need to be a little bit more patient. We worked together on a lot of things, making things work when it came to potlucks and different events and stuff. When it came out to the candlelight communion, that was a big deal. And it needed to be a certain way. And of course, I had my way of doing things, and Carol had her way of doing things. And sometimes they didn't jive. But we learned to work together, and we formed a bond that was really special. And I'm not sure exactly who told her that I knew anything about satellite dishes. I'd like to thank that person personally. I'd like to come forward. Because when her satellite dish went out and 3ABN was not available on her TV, guess who she called? Yeah. And I was glad to help her. And I came on the scene kind of late in the program. I only knew her for about 12 years. But the bond that we had was special in that she didn't have any problem calling me up and telling me that her remote didn't work on her TV. And she said, "So if you could come by in the morning," and it was like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, "Carol, you're not going to be able to watch your TV all night." She goes, "Well, that's okay." I said, No. So I'd go over and I'd fix her remote. Or we'd work on her phone over and over and over again. Technology, actually she did really good with technology. But there were those moments when things just got a little sideways, and I would walk in and she would hand me her phone, knowing that I already knew her password, and open it up, and I'd say, okay, and I'd do something on it, and she goes, "Hey," she goes, "I need to register the car." Okay. "What do you want me to do?" She goes, "Well, how can we do that?" I said, "Well, I pull up the app and open it up for her, And I said, okay, so what is your, what's your email address? And I put it in there. I said, okay, you want to put your password in? She goes, no, you put it in. I said, well, you have to give it to me. So she'd give it to me, and I'd put it in, and, pretty soon it was just like, she'd just hand me her phone and tell me it needs to do this. Because knowing that I knew all this information. I didn't want to know all that information. But she was secure enough with me that she could do that. And then when she decided that it was, that she needed to be transported to church every Sabbath, that was special for me. I was so glad to be able to get her here, because having her here and seeing the smile on her face while she was here was amazing. And so, when it came time for her to, not be at home anymore, that was hard. But going to see her and seeing her face light up when I'd walk into the room, well, sometimes, she'd be searching for her hair and her teeth, and, finally she just gave all that up and said, yeah, whatever. And, and like Josie said, when we went up to see her that night, the way she sat up in her bed was it was amazing. I was really happy to be there to see her smile and to know. So as the days counted down, I went in one time and I woke her up, and that was kind of a scary thing, because she didn't know where she was or who I was for a second. That was kind of weird. But after she finally found her level, got herself balanced out, she says, she goes, I think I'm about done. I said, yeah. I said, I get that. I understand that. She goes, and I think my kids are trying to come out. And I said, okay. So let them come out. Let them do what they need to do, Carol. They need to come see you. She goes, yeah, but it's so dangerous and all the storms. I said, your kids need to do what they need to do, Carol. Let them do it. Let them come see you. She goes, okay. I said, do you want to try to sit up again? She goes, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. So we had that prayer, that night before I left, and that was the last time I got to talk to her. But she was an amazing lady. Again, she taught me some things. When I came into this church, I was coming from a really dark place in my life. And, she allowed me to be part of this church because she allowed me to work with her. So our lesson study for this past week included a parable about the talents. There was a guy that got 5 talents, and a guy who got 2, and a guy that got 1. I think Miss Carol got 5. Amen. And I think she came up with more than 10. I think she tripled it. So I can't wait to see her when Jesus says, my good and faithful servant.
Is there anyone else? All right. I'm sure that all of us could continue all night long with stories about Carol, but I appreciate your sharing. I thought I would just close with a few scriptures, and then we will sing a song of celebration and close. Hearing and remembering all these things about Carol reminds me of the way Ellen White so poetically described people like Carol in the book Patriarchs and Prophets, page 481. She said, as the glow of the descending sun lights up the mountain peaks long after the sun itself has sunk behind the hills, so the works of the pure, the holy, and the good shed light upon the world long after the actors themselves have passed away. Their works, their words, their example will forever live. And then she quotes Psalm 112, verse 6, the righteous shall be in everlasting remembrance. And I know that she's going to be in our remembrance until we see her again on that wonderful day. We're certainly going to miss her. But the Apostle Paul and Jesus had some words that I like to remember when we're in a service like this. 1 Thessalonians 4:13, Paul said, I don't want you to be ignorant, brothers, concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as those who have no hope. Then remember Jesus saying in John 5, the hour is coming when all who are in their graves shall hear his voice and shall come forth. And then Paul goes on with those familiar words that are, to me, though they're familiar, they're exciting. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. And then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them. And I always like that word together right there. In the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore, comfort one another with these words. Then I just have to include John's description of what God has prepared for Carol and for all of us who love him in Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had disappeared, and the sea was no more. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, descending from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride dressed in beauty for her husband. Then I heard a great voice from the throne crying, Behold, the home of God is with men, and he will live among them. They shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more, and never again shall there be sorrow or crying or pain, for all those former things are past and gone. And then, as Kevin just mentioned, I believe Jesus is going to come to Carol, and he's going to say, Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Won't that be a wonderful day? I can't wait. So in closing, I'd like for us to sing the joyful song that reminds us of the celebration that we have to look forward to when we see Carol again. Hymn number 633, When We All Get to Heaven.
Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing his mercy and his grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, he'll prepare for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow nor a sign. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of him in glory, we've the toils of life to repay. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Onward to the prize before us, soon his beauty will behold. Soon the pearly gates will open, we shall tread the streets of gold. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory.
Let's close with prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you again this evening for the precious gift that you have given us in your loved one and our loved one, Carol. We thank you, Lord, for the wealth of the blessings that remain in the hearts of each of us that we've heard about this evening from all that she gave. And we thank you that though we will miss her, we know that we don't need to mourn like those who have no hope of reunion, but that rather we can celebrate her life of blessings to all of us. We can rejoice that her trials and her pain are over, never to experience them again, and we can look forward eagerly to seeing her again, this time in the prime of life, in the vigor of youth, knowing that we will never have to say goodbye again for all eternity. I just pray, Lord, that everyone in this sanctuary this evening will be certain that everything is right between them and their Savior, and that they have made him their best friend, as Carol did, so that all of us can rise with Carol to meet you in the air on that glorious day of your coming. We ask in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Thank you, all of you, for sharing.